Welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports. Today we're going to be recapping all the latest moves throughout the NBA and talk about the NBA draft. But before we get into it though, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages, and for my Spotify listeners, can you give us a 5-star review? It makes a massive difference. All links are in the description. The NBA draft has come and gone, and wow, what a whirlwind has been already. Since the finals wrapped up, we've already had a couple of moves. Bradley Beal has been traded to the Phoenix Suns, and then the Wizards have slowly been making other moves that seem to be kind of like a fire sale. We'll talk about their moves a little bit later, but to talk about the top 5 picks in the NBA draft, particularly at the top, we all know Victor Wembanyama is a generational talent. The minute the Spurs won the NBA draft lottery in May, we knew that's where he was going to end up going, and couldn't be a better situation for the young kid, where he is coming from France. We know the Spurs have a bevy of international talent, just like we saw Manu Ginobili, fellow Frenchman Tony Parker, Boris Diaw, even also from France, and then even Tim Duncan, who is technically a U.S. citizen, but he grew up in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So they have a huge international influence in this organization, and they did their homework, and I feel like it's a great fit, great culture. But since Tim Duncan's retirement, we haven't seen them be at that type of level. They still were able to carry out a few postseason appearances under Pop, but after DeMar DeRozan was traded and then we saw them kind of flicker out of the bubble picture, it was over from there. And I like the Spurs, and it's good that they're finally getting this generational piece to hopefully revive this franchise. The NBA is always good when the San Antonio Spurs are in contention and have eyes and ears around from various media outlets, and now with Wemby, they're going to be getting that. Absolutely. There are going to be a ton of people lining up. We already seen San Antonio fan shops being loaded with Wemby gear, and franchise ticket seats have been through the roof. Definitely going to drive up some ticket prices for sure whenever the Spurs go on the road, but it's definitely well worth the wait, hopefully, as long as he stays healthy. Talk about Wemby in particular. He is obviously a generational talent, 7'4", with guard-like handle ability, and we haven't seen that. It's just a taller Kevin Durant. Durant is rumored to be 6'8", 6'9". On a good day, we see them stand eye to eye with DeMarcus Cousins, for example, who's like 6'11". So I think he's an undercover 7-footer, but truly Wemby is above that at 7'4", and the fact that he can just get from the 3-point line to the rim in about one dribble is mind-boggling to me. I mean, I stand at 5'8". He's gonna make me look like a dwarf, that's for sure. He is gonna light up this NBA world, and like I said, it couldn't be under better circumstances to start off your career. Obviously, we worry about the frame, where he could be susceptible to injury issues because he's just a larger body, and we've seen larger players have issues with their feet, like Yao Ming. He dealt with foot issues that eventually led to his retirement, but however, he's at least taken the precautions to do so, and that's what I really like to see. I think he has already a good set of training staff, and now adjusting to the physicality of the NBA will be a different thing, and also just back-to-backs, an 82-game schedule, plus a potential in-season tournament that will be debuting next season. We'll see how that turns out, but it's going to be an adjustment, absolutely. Now, I think something that helps Wembanyama is that he has already been playing with professionals since about the age of 16 or 17. In Europe, we know that when you turn 16, you can join a pro club as long as you're talented enough. And they go up against grown men. Now, we haven't seen his man body just yet. He's only 20 years old, has a lot left to fill out this frame. He's coming into the NBA in much better NBA readiness than a guy like Chet Holmgren last year. And immediately last year in the Drew League, he suffered that terrible Liz Frank injury, and he already has questions about how can he defend players and put a body on players when he is very wiry. Wemby is far less wiry. He has a little bit more bulk to him, and he's talked about how his core strength is different in what he does. It may not show up in what you can see, but he's worked on it, absolutely. So I think that adjustment and growing pains will absolutely be there, but I pray to the NBA injury gods that he stays healthy and we get to see a long career out of Wembanyama, because he's going to wreck the league, absolutely. I'm excited to see it. Picks 2 through 5, all very interesting. In a draft that only one player from the NCAA actually landed in the top 5, something we haven't seen for a few years because of this one and done era, but now the NCAA obviously has been late to the paying of players, and they're finally doing that maybe a season or two ago. But before that, we've seen players take the G League route, or they go through the G League Ignite, or they go abroad, or they go another route, which is a new league called the Overtime Elite, where the Thompson Twins ended up being from. But to talk about the second overall pick, Brandon Miller, he was actually from Alabama, a very good player, probably the best player in the country, at least from the collegiate level this season, and he was well worth the number 2 overall pick. He is a guy that's a wing player, very good length. I like that size. He is a very good shooter for what he does at the collegiate level, and let's hope that translates to the NBA. And I think it's a better fit than what Scoot could bring to the Hornets, because they already have LaMelo Ball. I think getting a wing player as a guy that can spread the floor but also slash to the rim, help out LaMelo Ball, that will change things over in Charlotte, something that's much needed because it's been rough times. I mean, they made a couple play-in tournaments, but they haven't officially made the playoffs yet, and they're undergoing ownership changes, absolutely, so we'll see what happens in Charlotte, but definitely a step in the right direction. At 3, this is finally when we got to see Scoot Henderson. He was up there to be the number 2 overall pick for a while, and he had a great showing against Wembanyama in an exhibition matchup against Metropolitans 92 and G League Ignite back in the fall of 2022. Definitely showed up and showed out, and he is just a middle linebacker body. I mean, he's just so bulky. I don't know where he put on the weight, but he's very buff. Questions about his jump shot, absolutely, but just the ability to get into the paint and dictate things. He has that explosive kind of Russell Westbrook, Derrick Rose type of energy to him. Technically skilled or just being a skillful player, he has some things to work on, and that is something we've seen in these more explosive players. Once that athleticism starts to wear out due to just attrition and age, they're not skilled enough to continue on in the NBA. So that's something that Scoot will have to work on if he wants to have a long career. But going into a really good spot in Portland, I think him learning under Damian Lillard, at least for however long he decides to stay with the organization, will be beneficial to his young career, and eventually maybe he'll take over the reins and be the face of the franchise moving forward in Portland. And to round out the top 5, we got to see a really nice story with the Thompson Twins. At number 4 overall, we got to see Amin Thompson be drafted by the Houston Rockets, and then right after that, at the 5th overall pick, we got to see Azar Thompson being drafted by the Detroit Pistons. And this is a really cool story. Identical twins. They got to go with Overtime Elite, a new league that is a professional developmental league for kids that are between the ages of 16 to 20. They do get paid just like G League Ignite team does, but it's on a different scale, and it's an entirely different league. But it's good to see other smaller developmental leagues get some shine, and this is obviously the biggest success story this league has ever had. They have a lot of nice intangibles. They have a big ferocity. I mean, they challenge one another. It's going to be great to see them go head to head. They have a lot of jokes. I love their personality, and I think that they're going to bring that to each of those organizations who desperately need some talent. I know Houston has been going through some rebuilding lately because they have had a changeover in coach. Now Ime Udoka is going to be leading the charge, and then they have a lot of young pieces, absolutely, but I think now somebody has to whip them into shape and say, like, you know, we're not kids anymore. We're not an AAU team, which has been the whole thing around the Houston Rockets lately, but hopefully things turn around in Houston. And then for Detroit, it's been rough sledding early on in Cade Cunningham's career. He's dealt with some injury issues, kind of picked it up, and he was able to win Rookie of the Year in his first season, was knocked out early this season, and let's see what happens when he comes back at the start of the 2023-2024 season. I think that'll be a nice pairing because both of these kids are about 6'7". They have a nice amount of length as well, so they can get out and guard guys on the perimeter. They're kind of the hybrid point guard, shooting guard type of mentality. So I think playing style, they're both good fits for this up and coming teams, and let's see what happens in their careers. Now I want to talk about the trades, right? There were a bunch of trades after I talked about the Bradley Beal trade. You can find that video. Link is in the description. The Bradley Beal trade kind of kicked things off in the NBA offseason, but then we got to see the Wizards continuing to make moves. Now they got rid of Bradley Beal, kind of ignited this fire sale that the Wizards have been starting. Their next move was trading away Kristaps Porzingis, and initially there was this deal on the table between the Boston Celtics where they would get Porzingis, and then Marcus Morris would have been sent to the Washington Wizards from the LA Clippers, and then Malcolm Brogdon would have been sent to the LA Clippers. But unfortunately, that trade was axed, or it fell through, because there were concerns about Malcolm Brogdon's health. They just didn't feel safe and secure, and we know the Clippers have been bitten by this injury bug for a while now since signing those two superstar forwards. They don't want to have any more issues, so that's why they probably pulled out of that deal. To substitute, the Wizards and Celtics was just trying to find who was that third team to kind of sweeten the deal, because the Celtics really wanted Kristaps Porzingis, and they found the Memphis Grizzlies. Now it did take a sacrifice in sending Marcus Smart to Memphis, and then basically the same parts were integrated. Now the Wizards did get back a couple more role players. We got to see Mike Muscala, a nice stretch five who is known to be a pretty solid shooter, and additionally they got Danilo Gallinari, who missed last season with the Celtics, overcoming injury like I said, but I think when healthy he gives you a lot there, and any contending team would love to poach either one of these two players. And remember, they also have Landry Shamet, at least for right now, from the Bradley Beal trade from Phoenix. So Washington has compiled a lot of assets now, and it's a mixed bag, but we'll talk about it a little bit later. The Celtics now getting Kristaps Porzingis, that is their third option. What I like about Kristaps Porzingis coming to Boston is that not only is he a pick and pop player, so it allows Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to access the lane and get to the rim, is that also he's somewhat of a two-way player. Remember, Victor Wembanyama is now the unicorn, but before that, actually a lot of people referred to Porzingis as a unicorn, a guy that can do things on both sides. And since then, obviously he's had injury issues, so that's been something plaguing him. I know his tenure in Dallas ended a little abruptly. He was a little bit quiet in DC, but was solid when he took the court. I like the fact that he is a guy that is a capable shot blocker. He's not the best. He can be kind of lazy in his rotations, but still very productive when he puts in the effort. I think teams are gearing up for a potential matchup with the Denver Nuggets. Jokic is a generational big. This day and age now with him, Giannis, Embiid, these teams are driven by bigs. And the Celtics, they do have Al Horford, Robert Williams. I think they're solid, but Porzingis kind of combines their skill sets. Robert Williams is a guy that's not so great at guarding on the perimeter, but is great at defending the paint. Al Horford can do a little bit of both, but he also adds an offensive punch. Can guard guys on the perimeter, but the nice thing about Porzingis is that he adds an offensive punch and defensive prowess. So it could mean that one of those two guys could be expendable. I actually would think it would be Robert Williams because he actually has some trade value. But for right now, it's just three bodies to throw at the Denver Nuggets and Nikola Jokic. So that's great to have in your back pocket. On draft day, the Wizards continued to make moves, and hours before we heard the #1 overall pick be read, they made use of their trade asset in Chris Paul. They acquired him in the Bradley Beal trade, and I knew he's not going to stay there too long. He wants to go to a contender. I personally thought he would go to one of the two LA teams like the Clippers or the Lakers. I thought he would have probably gone to the Lakers just because of that relationship with LeBron, but he's going to be sent over to the Golden State Warriors for Jordan Poole. very interesting move there, to say the least. I think for the Warriors side of things, I like it on the offensive side. It just takes some pressure off of Steph. We saw his legs kind of start to wear out. Just didn't have enough gas in the tank because it was essentially carrying the Warriors against the LA Lakers. So this takes some pressure off of him. But I think defensively, Chris Paul is just not the same guy. And I think even his durability has always been in question. But just the fact that he's just not the same on-ball defender that he used to be is a big, big issue. And I think this could put Golden State into some precarious situations defensively. So yes, they get some offensive help, but defensively, they lose that out. Now, Jordan Poole is never going to be a good defender either, but I thought in that 6-man role he was a pretty solid fit, but just I guess they were sick of his poor shot selection in the postseason, and that kind of led to his downfall. But interesting move. I like the pairing because now not only it takes pressure off of Steph Curry, but also it lets Chris Paul be a maestro of this Golden State offense. It's interesting to see because how he could work off ball, because Golden State offense is very movement oriented, so we'll see how he gets involved in that. But I like the idea of him getting into pick and roll situations, getting Draymond on the roller, and then Draymond feeding in guys like Andrew Wiggins or somebody else making a hard cut to the rim. So obviously it's going to be an adjustment, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Golden State. The Wizards, they get a guy that's going to be box office. He's going to put up numbers on probably a bad team. And I think Jordan Poole has a chance now to redeem himself or resurrect his career. After seeing him take bad shots and just not have a lot of defensive prowess, we know he's not going to be a great defender, but he just lost focus a lot of times and didn't show a ton of effort on the defensive end. That's what defense is half the time, just showing it and putting your body in front of somebody just takes effort. And you didn't see that too much last season. Also, just shot selection, gonna have to improve that if he wants to either stay on the Wizards or maybe move on to a different team. We'll see. But definitely now the Wizards have like a young piece, somebody to fill in the seats in DC, and then they also have some additional trade assets. So let's talk about the Wizards' interesting offseason. I talked about it just briefly before in my video, but it started off with the Bradley Beal trade, and initially I wasn't too convinced on that return on that trade value right there. Bradley Beal's a 3-time All-Star, and what it got them now is 6 second-round draft picks and 4 first-round pick swaps, and the second-round draft picks go up until 2030, and then the pick swaps are from 2024, 2026, 2028, and 2030. All nice, and then you get a lot of other pieces like Landry Shamet, Mike Muscala, Danilo Gallinari. I said that they may be able to get you additional first-round picks, kind of like what OKC has done post Russell Westbrook. I think they definitely have an avenue to do that. They just won't get as many amount of picks like OKC did because they just didn't have amount of players as talented to yield that type of return. But this is a nice little haul. I just don't like the timing of it. That's my thing, because they had opportunities. When John Wall went down in 2019, that was their chance to begin this rebuild. They elected to go with Bradley Beal, who racked up a couple nice years and put up numbers, and then he made a couple All-Star teams. And what has that given you? Just one gentleman's sweep in 2021 against the Philadelphia 76ers. Not a lot there, and they were just standing around in NBA mediocrity. Not good enough to make even the play-in tournament, but not good enough to get a high draft pick, and they missed out on a ton of good prospects in that time. 2020, they had Anthony Edwards, there was LaMelo Ball, there was Tyrese Halliburton, there was in 2021, you saw Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, a few other guys in that draft. 2022, Paolo Banchero, and then this year they had a chance at Wembanyama, but they decided to go with boosting up this whole chance to get in the postseason, so they went with Chris Knapp's. They got Bradley Beal to an extension. All these other little moves and didn't really turn into anything. And it's just disappointing because right now it seems that this rebuild is going to be lasting into the better part of this decade. And they had opportunities to kickstart this rebuild only sooner, and they maybe had a chance at one of these great guys, because in the future, I'm not sure who these prospects could be to really change the culture in DC. It just maybe comes from an organizational standpoint, but the Wizards are going to be out of playoff contention for the better part of this decade. The Trailblazers drafted Scoot Henderson, and that's great. I think future guard that's going to be leading the charge for possibly the next 5-6 years. But does that move the needle in helping Damian Lillard get a ring? No, it doesn't. The title window, or even just the playoff window for Portland, closed the moment they traded CJ McCollum. And they basically punted that year, and they tried to retool, hope Damian Lillard was healthy, but he was kind of dinged up last season. Came back in 2023, made an all-star game, had a pretty stellar season, but even then he was dinged up on various stretches in that season. He's getting older, he's 32. I don't know what exactly they can do now to really help him out. I think the only thing they can do really is send him to a contender. I love Damian Lillard's whole mantra of just kind of standing up for the team you were drafted with and trying to be that piece to lead the team back into postseason success, especially getting a championship. But he's been now overshadowed by Steph and LeBron, and then now Giannis and Jokic. So he's going to have to make some changes, and I like that he stood up against Paul George for switching teams every now and then. But I think now you got to swallow your pride and try to manufacture a trade, preferably to Miami. Miami kind of pulled out on that Bradley Beal talk because they were trying to focus on Damian Lillard. They definitely have the assets for it, and I think that would be a great move because him paired with Jimmy Butler and Heat culture kind of go hand in hand together. I think that would be a great union there, definitely propel them to be amongst the East elite, because they already made the NBA Finals with this current roster as is, and I think Damian Lillard would only take it to an extra dimension, and then that would even put them in favor, at least even on paper, against the Boston Celtics, who I think would be penciled in to be the favorites coming out of the East. Giannis and the Bucks obviously loom around. The Sixers are definitely a team that are always hovering around Eastern Conference playoff contention. But the East is very wide open, and I think a move out to South Beach would be career-changing for Damian Lillard. So that's it for this NBA draft special of Spectator Sports. Some updates for the channel moving forward. What I've been doing is releasing clips of the full pods before the actual full pod is uploaded to YouTube. And what I like to do with that is just to give the audience a little bit of a preview on some specific topics before the full pod is actually uploaded on Thursday, which is our usual airing time. And it just gives the audience a little bit more access to some specific things. You can find that in the Spectator Sports clips playlist that I made for you guys. And always, these clips are going to be uploaded to Instagram and TikTok. Links are in the description. And until next time, take care and be safe.